Lila Harrison guided a professional basketball player through his knee recovery exercises in the rehabilitation center, where the morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She worked as a physical therapist specializing in sports rehabilitation at Peak Performance Therapy Center and had built a reputation for helping athletes return to their peak condition. Her smartphone buzzed, displaying a message from her husband Marcus. "Don't forget dinner at Mom's Gallery tonight. It's the final meeting for Brianna's engagement party." Lila's shoulders tensed as she read the message. Since marrying Marcus Harrison 5 years ago, her relationship with her mother-in-law Diane had been a constant struggle. Diane Harrison was a former high school art teacher who now owned an exclusive gallery in Boston's art district. For her, her son's marriage to a physical therapist from a working-class background had been a crushing disappointment. Since the pandemic, Lila's caseload had tripled with injured athletes, but Diane and Marcus's sister Brianna consistently dismissed her profession as just moving people's arms and legs around. Additionally, not having children was another constant source of Diane's sharp disapproval. She never missed an opportunity to mention the importance of continuing the Harrison legacy during their conversations. When they arrived at Diane's gallery in the Refined Arts District, Brianna's silver Mercedes was already parked outside. In the consultation area surrounded by expensive paintings, Diane and Brianna were huddled together, their voices low and intense. "Finally, you're here," Diane said, her smile as cold as winter rain. "Where's Marcus? He said the audit will run late tonight. Should we start without him?" Brianna was preparing for her engagement party to Julian Remington next month. Julian was a vice president at an investment bank, and for Diane, this relationship represented a chance to elevate the family's social standing in Boston's elite circles. "We were finalizing the guest list for the party," Brianna said, running her manicured fingers through her perfectly styled hair. "You and Marcus will be seated with the family, naturally. Let me know if there's anything I can help with," Lila offered, trying to bridge the gap. "Thank you, but we have everything under control," Brianna replied curtly. "My connections in the art world are handling the arrangements. You just need to show up and look presentable." The conversation flowed around wedding details, with Lila sitting silently, her input never requested or valued. The gallery walls displayed the Harrison family's achievements and photographs, but Lila and Marcus's wedding photo was relegated to a small corner, barely visible. Marcus arrived, kissed Lila's cheek, and settled beside her with an apologetic look. As evening approached, the discussion turned to the Remington family's influence and wealth in Boston's financial sector. "By the way, Lila," Diane suddenly turned to her with calculating eyes, "could we count on a bit more financial support this month? There are some additional expenses for Brianna's party." Lila and Marcus had been providing monthly assistance to Diane since Marcus's father passed away. This money was crucial for maintaining Diane's gallery and her lifestyle in the arts community. As they prepared to leave, Francine, Diane's personal assistant, quietly approached Lila. "Mrs. Harrison, about tomorrow's venue walkthrough, what time should the catering staff expect you to arrive?" Lila looked puzzled. "The catering staff? I'm a guest, Francine." Francine's face flushed with embarrassment. "I apologize, ma'am. I misunderstood." Once in the car, Lila felt the familiar weight of always being treated as an outsider pressing down on her chest. What kind of humiliation would she face at Brianna's upcoming engagement party? Based on 5 years of similar experiences, she couldn't allow herself to hope for better treatment. Still, for Marcus's sake, she needed to maintain her composure and dignity. On the day of Brianna's engagement party, brilliant sunshine bathed the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston's Cultural District. Lila had been anxious since morning, but Marcus's reassuring words helped calm her nerves. "Today is Brianna's special day. Let's celebrate with them," Lila told herself as she styled her hair in front of the mirror. She had chosen a simple yet elegant navy dress, carefully avoiding anything that might draw Diane's criticism. "You look beautiful," Marcus placed his hands on her shoulders and smiled at her reflection. "Let's go. Mom will be upset if we're late." When they arrived at the museum, the parking area was filled with expensive cars. While Marcus parked, Lila took a deep breath to steel herself. She knew her relationship with her in-laws was strained, but she hoped for a peaceful evening. Walking through the marble-columned entrance, they headed to the party reception. At the check-in desk adorned with white orchids, several staff members greeted guests with professional smiles. Mr. and Mrs. Harrison, Marcus announced, and the receptionist consulted her list. Mr. Marcus, welcome to tonight's celebration. But when Lila looked for her name on the guest list, her heart sank. Her name wasn't there. I'm sorry, the receptionist said apologetically, but I don't see Lila Harrison on our VIP list. There must be a mistake, Lila's voice wavered. Marcus was still greeting other guests, unaware of the situation. Is there a problem? Diane's voice cut through the air like ice. She appeared wearing an elegant silver gown, her expression coldly satisfied. Diane, my name isn't on the guest list, Lila said, fighting to stay composed. Diane glanced at the list with mock surprise. Oh dear, you weren't included in the family section. You can join the general attendees if you'd like. The words hit Lila like a physical blow. Nearby guests turned to stare, their expressions mixing curiosity with disdain. Lila's face burned with shame, but she refused to let tears fall. What's happening? Marcus finally noticed and approached them. I'll fix this immediately. No, Marcus, Lila said quietly. Today is Brianna's day. Let's not make a scene. She accepted the general admission wristband, her silent act of defiance. Marcus's face flushed with anger, but he stayed quiet when Lila squeezed his hand firmly. A sensible choice, Diane murmured. Now let's proceed to the reception. Julian's parents are expecting us. Diane glided away gracefully, leaving Lila and Marcus behind. This is unbelievable, Marcus muttered through clenched teeth. I'm confronting Mom right now. Not tonight, Lila took his arm. This isn't the time for confrontation. We'll discuss it later. The ceremony in the sculpture gallery was elegantly conducted. Brianna, wearing a stunning cocktail dress, radiated joy. Julian's face glowed with genuine love. But Lila's heart felt heavy with hurt. She could feel Diane's cold stare tracking her throughout the evening. After the ceremony, guests moved to the museum's grand ballroom for dinner. Elegantly arranged tables displayed place cards for each guest. Lila and Marcus were directed to the VIP family table and sat down. Are you holding up okay? Marcus whispered. Yes, she managed a weak smile. I'm trying not to let it affect me. Their table included Diane, Julian's parents Theodore and Vivian Remington, and several close relatives. The engaged couple sat at the head table, and toasts began. After the speeches, servers started bringing out the first course. As gourmet appetizers were placed before each guest, Lila noticed something troubling. No plate appeared at her place setting. Excuse me, Lila quietly stopped a passing server. Where's my dinner? The server looked uncomfortable. I apologize, but those were my instructions. Marcus started to rise angrily, but Brianna called him over to the head table at that moment. Lila sat alone, burning with embarrassment and rage. You seem distressed, Brianna suddenly materialized beside Lila. Her smile was cruel and calculating. Why are you treating me this way? Lila asked in a low voice. Brianna leaned close and whispered viciously. Dinner is reserved for real family members. People like you don't qualify. That was Lila's breaking point. Years of humiliation, subtle cruelty, and cold rejection crashed together in this single moment. Lila slowly stood and placed her napkin on the table. The room gradually quieted as attention turned to her. If that's your position, then I don't belong here. Her voice was soft but unwavering. Across the table, Diane opened her mouth to speak, but Lila was beyond listening. She carefully removed the engagement ring Brianna had asked her to hold temporarily and placed it on the table. The diamond caught the light as it touched the white tablecloth. If I'm not family, then I'm leaving. Silence fell like a heavy curtain over the room. She could see Marcus rushing back from the head table, but Lila was already walking toward the exit. Lila. Marcus's voice echoed behind her. Wait. It's just a misunderstanding. Diane's voice carried unprecedented panic. Please come back. But Lila's steps never faltered. She held her spine straight, lifted her chin high, and walked out with complete dignity. Just before reaching the door, she glanced back once. Diane's face had turned ashen white. Brianna stood frozen, speechless. And on Theodore and Vivian Remington's faces, especially Vivian's, there was unmistakable outrage. Lila walked through the museum lobby and breathed deeply of the cool night air. Her heart ached, but she also felt an unexpected sense of freedom. She had finally escaped the anger and shame she'd carried for too long. As she prepared to call a taxi, she heard footsteps approaching. Turning, she saw Julian's mother Vivian hurrying toward her. "Please wait." Vivian gently touched her arm. "What happened in there is absolutely inexcusable. Diane and Brianna's behavior. I have no words." Lila smiled through her unshed tears. "Thank you, Vivian, but I need to go home. I can't stay any longer." "I completely understand," Vivian nodded. "But please know that you handled yourself with remarkable strength and grace." Those words allowed Lila to smile genuinely for the first time that evening. She hailed a taxi and headed home. After Lila left, heavy tension settled over the museum venue. Marcus returned from the head table and saw Brianna's engagement ring sitting abandoned. His expression darkened immediately. "What happened? Where's Lila?" he demanded urgently. Diane attempted to mask her panic with a strained smile. "Just a small misunderstanding, Marcus. She'll return shortly." However, Julian's mother Vivian interrupted with an icy voice. "It wasn't a misunderstanding. I witnessed everything you and Brianna did to Lila." Marcus's eyes blazed with fury. He noticed the general admission wristband on the table and understood. At that moment, his expression shifted from anger to pure rage. "What have you done?" His voice had lost all warmth. "Why wasn't Lila served dinner? Why was she excluded from the family section?" Julian stood beside Brianna, beginning to grasp the situation. "What's happening here, Brianna?" Brianna's face flushed as she started making excuses. "It was just a harmless joke, Julian." She overreacted completely. "A joke?" Julian's voice was filled with disbelief. "Excluding someone from dinner and treating them like a stranger is your idea of humor?" Throughout the venue, guests began murmuring among themselves. Word would spread quickly through Boston's social circles. Julian's father Theodore rose slowly and fixed Diane with a stern gaze. "This behavior is absolutely unacceptable," his voice carried quiet authority. "We value family unity and mutual respect. We cannot associate with a family that treats people so cruelly." Vivian stood beside her husband and nodded firmly. "Our support for this engagement is temporarily withdrawn. We cannot proceed under these circumstances." Brianna's face went white with shock. "But this is my moment." Julian took his fiancée's hand but spoke with cold determination. "Brianna, if this reflects your true character, we need to seriously re-evaluate our future together." Marcus was beyond listening to explanations. He clutched the wristband and declared, "I'm going to find Lila," before storming out. Outside, museum staff were helping Lila into a taxi. Marcus sprinted to the parking garage and jumped into his car. Gripping the steering wheel tightly, he raced home while mentally rehearsing his apologies. When Lila reached home, she hesitated at the front door. This house represented her love with Marcus, but now doubt clouded her heart. She unlocked the door, entered the quiet space, collapsed on the sofa, and wept silently. 20 minutes later, the front door burst open. Marcus rushed in, breathing heavily. "Lila," his voice calling her name carried deep anguish and worry. Lila looked up, and fresh tears fell at the sight of her husband. Marcus sat beside her and pulled her into his embrace. "Mom and Brianna's actions are inexcusable," he said quietly. "You're the most precious person in my world. I'm devastated by their behavior." Lila felt fragile in her husband's protective arms. "Why am I still an outsider after 5 years of marriage?" "You're not an outsider," Marcus lifted her face gently. "You are my family, my everything. Mom and Brianna's prejudices aren't mine." They held each other as darkness fell outside. The room filled with evening shadows. Finally, Lila whispered, "What happens now?" Marcus responded with unwavering resolve. "First, I'm immediately stopping all financial support to Mom. I won't enable her lifestyle anymore." Lila stared at her husband in amazement. "Really?" "But Diane. Mom must face the consequences of her choices," Marcus said firmly. "She has enough resources. She simply can't maintain that gallery and social status." Lila nodded slowly. Her wounded heart still ached, but her husband's conviction strengthened her spirit. "What about our relationship with them?" she asked carefully. "We need distance until they genuinely reflect and apologize." Marcus squeezed her hand. They sat quietly, planning their future together. Despite the pain and anger, new resolve was taking root. Marcus suggested hesitantly, "How about a weekend retreat, just us? I know a beautiful inn on the Maine coast." Lila's first genuine smile appeared. "That sounds perfect. We need time for ourselves." Throughout the night, their phones rang constantly. Calls came from Diane, Brianna, and even Julian, but they ignored them all. They needed space to heal. The next morning, Marcus called the bank to cancel automatic transfers to his mother's account. Lila contacted her workplace to request a few days off. Her supervisor was understanding, saying, "You've always supported everyone else. Now it's time to focus on yourself." Desperate messages kept arriving from Diane, but Marcus sent only one brief text. "We need space. Your and Brianna's behavior was inexcusable. Lila is my wife and my family. If you can't accept that, we must reconsider our relationship." While packing their bags, Lila gazed out the window. Morning sunlight bathed the garden flowers, heralding a fresh start. Yesterday's shame and hurt remained in her heart, but she also felt an unexpected sense of freedom. "I'm ready." Marcus placed his hand on her shoulder. Lila turned with a smile. "Yes, let's go." As they left the house, they found a letter in the mailbox. It was from Julian. Lila opened it in the car, and they read it together. "I deeply apologize for last night's events. I was appalled by Brianna's family's behavior. Our engagement is currently suspended. My parents have decided we cannot proceed under these circumstances. I've told Brianna she must seriously examine herself. Lila, I admire your dignified response. Safe travels. Julian Remington." They finished reading in contemplative silence. Marcus started the car and drove toward the Maine coast. A week passed. Lila and Marcus spent peaceful time by the ocean, mending their emotional wounds. As they enjoyed a relaxed breakfast at their small coastal inn, Marcus's phone rang again. The screen showed his mom calling. Marcus hesitated briefly but declined the call. "Diane?" Lila asked, watching the tranquil waves outside their window. "Yes." Marcus sipped his coffee. "That's the 12th call since yesterday. I've gotten multiple messages from Brianna too." Lila showed her phone. The screen displayed unread texts from Brianna. "Lila, please call me. I'm genuinely sorry." They continued breakfast in comfortable silence. Ocean breezes drifted through the window, gently moving the sheer curtains. "They might need more time," Marcus said quietly, "to determine if they're truly repentant or just want things back to normal." Lila took her husband's hand. "I support your judgment, but we can't avoid them indefinitely." "I know," Marcus sighed deeply. "It's just that remembering that night." On their final vacation day, as they prepared to return home, Marcus came back from checking out with a puzzled expression. "What's wrong?" Lila asked. The innkeeper mentioned an interesting newspaper article. He opened the paper he was carrying. "The Remington family has announced a charitable foundation. They're creating a fund to support physical therapists." Lila took the newspaper with surprise. The article described how Julian's parents had established a foundation supporting physical therapists who had worked tirelessly during the pandemic. In an interview, Vivian Remington stated, "We want to create a society that honors real heroes and values their contributions." "Is this because of me?" Lila whispered. Marcus placed his hand on her shoulder. I can't say for certain, but the timing suggests. They quietly loaded their luggage and drove home. Upon arriving, several letters waited in their mailbox. Among them were Julian's official engagement postponement notice and a personal apology letter from the Remington family to Lila. 3 weeks after resuming normal life, Lila had returned to her duties at the rehabilitation center. Her colleagues noticed a subtle transformation in her. She displayed greater confidence and more assertive leadership. One weekday evening, as Lila finished her shift and walked to the parking lot, she spotted a familiar car. Diane Harrison was waiting beside it. Gone was her usual polished appearance, she looked simply dressed and visibly exhausted. Lila, Diane's voice shook. Could we speak for a moment? Lila stopped and studied her mother-in-law. The once proud figure had vanished. Diane now appeared small and vulnerable. All right, Lila agreed quietly. They entered a cafe near the rehabilitation center. Diane ordered coffee but left it untouched. My behavior was inexcusable, Diane said through tears. I was consumed by pride and prejudice. I never tried to see who you really are, how valuable you are. Lila listened silently, trying to gauge the sincerity in Diane's words. Have you heard from the Remington family? Diane asked. Yes, from Julian and his parents. Diane smiled bitterly. They've severed all contact with us. Julian told Brianna he'd reconsider only if she genuinely changes. What about Brianna? She's soul-searching too, Diane replied wearily. For the first time, she's considering how her actions impact others. Silence settled between them. Outside the cafe window, people hurried past on their evening commutes. I'm selling my gallery, Diane suddenly revealed. Without Marcus's support, I can't sustain that lifestyle. I'm planning to move to a modest apartment. Lila was startled by Diane's transformation. She had once prioritized social status above everything. Now she was embracing a simpler existence. Diane, Lila chose her words carefully. I might be able to forgive you, but rebuilding trust will take time. Diane nodded. I understand completely. I'm just asking Robert and you for a chance. I want to change. That evening, Lila shared her conversation with Marcus. He listened thoughtfully and finally nodded. Let's meet with Mom, he decided. But I'll make clear that our relationship can't return to what it was before. The following weekend, Lila and Marcus visited Diane's new apartment. Compared to her previous gallery space, it was remarkably modest. Diane welcomed them warmly and had prepared a homemade lunch. You cooked yourself? Marcus asked in amazement. He had never seen his mom in the kitchen. Yes, Diane answered, slightly embarrassed. I'm learning from YouTube. I'm not skilled, but I'm practicing. The conversation started awkwardly but gradually became more natural. Diane discussed her recent experiences and acknowledged how warped her values had been. I've always judged people by wealth and status, she confessed honestly. But now I see how hollow that was. Lila observed her mother-in-law's transformation. It didn't appear superficial. Something fundamental was shifting. What about Brianna? Marcus asked. She's struggling too, Diane answered. Julian has given her time, but she understands she must genuinely change. Before leaving, Diane handed Lila a small box. Open it, she said quietly. When Lila opened the box, inside was a beautiful silver bracelet. It was engraved with the words, "Family is bound by love, not blood." I still have much to learn, Diane said. But I want to truly acknowledge that you are my family, Lila. From that day forward, their relationship gradually improved. Marcus partially resumed financial support to Diane, but limited to basic necessities, not the unconditional aid of before. Diane accepted this and tried adapting to a simpler life. A month later, Brianna came to meet Lila directly. For the first time, her former arrogance was gone, and she apologized sincerely. I will regret that night for the rest of my life, Brianna said. I've realized my own shallowness. I don't ask for forgiveness. I just want to change. Lila smiled gently. People can change, Brianna. Both you and I. As autumn deepened, all family members agreed to receive counseling and work on building healthy relationships. The first session was tense, but it was a necessary process. One evening, Lila and Marcus were sitting on their porch, watching the sunset. The wind rustled the trees, and golden leaves danced downward. I never imagined, Lila said, resting her head on Marcus's shoulder, that such a humiliating night would bring about such change. Marcus embraced his wife. It's because you stood up courageously. Your strength changed everything. They silently watched the sunset. The future remained uncertain, but today, they had taken a definite step forward. One Sunday, a year later, a small barbecue party was held in Lila and Marcus's backyard. Lila, arranging final decorations on the garden table, placed her hand on her slightly swollen belly. 6 months pregnant, she and Marcus were eagerly awaiting their first child. Don't carry heavy things, Diane called out worriedly, taking the fruit platter from her hands. Leave it to me. Diane had changed remarkably over the past year. She had adapted to living in a modest apartment and volunteered 2 days a week at Lila's rehabilitation center. She listened to patients and, for the first time, devoted time to people other than herself. Thank you, Diane, Lila smiled. Their relationship wasn't completely healed, but a new bond based on mutual respect was developing. Brianna and Julian had married in a small ceremony 6 months earlier. Unlike her previous desire for grandeur, this was a heartfelt ceremony with only close friends and family. Brianna had abandoned her sense of superiority, approaching her relationship with Julian more humbly. How's the baby? Brianna sat beside Lila and asked gently. Very active, especially loves to kick at night, Lila laughed. Marcus, grilling steaks, watched this scene with deep satisfaction. The sight of his mother and sister genuinely connecting with his wife was once unimaginable. How about a toast to healthy family relationships? Julian suggested, raising his glass. Everyone raised their glasses and said in unison, to healthy family relationships. Lila's glass contained non-alcoholic sparkling cider. After the meal, Diane handed Lila a small gift. It was a hand-knitted baby blanket. I made it myself, Diane said, slightly embarrassed. It's not perfect, but I put my heart into it. Lila was moved and hugged her mother-in-law. It's beautiful. Thank you. As evening approached, soft twilight enveloped the garden. Marcus sat beside his wife and wrapped his arm around her shoulders. Looking back, that engagement party was a turning point for all of us, Lila said quietly. Marcus nodded. Sometimes painful events create the greatest growth. Diane overheard their conversation from across the table. She smiled softly, preparing to welcome her first grandchild while carrying lessons learned from past mistakes. I finally understand what real family means, Diane said quietly. It's not bound by blood, but by mutual respect and love. As the first stars appeared in the night sky, they talked and laughed together. Lila had overcome her painful past and discovered stronger confidence and self-worth. The entire family had grown from that difficult experience. A new chapter was opening before them. It might not be a perfect story, but it was more beautiful, built on truth and dignity.